Imagine you are a British tanker in 1943, patrolling a quiet valley in Tunisia. Suddenly, a massive, boxy silhouette emerges from the dust nearly 2 miles away. Before you can even rotate your turret, a thunderous crack echoes through the air, and your lead tank erupts into a ball of white-hot fire. You've just encountered the most feared machine of the Second World War. It wasn't just a tank, it was a psychological trauma on tracks. It was the Tiger I. Today, we're tearing down the myths and looking into the steel soul of the 54-ton predator that forced the Allies to rewrite the rules of war. The genesis of the Tiger I was born from a radical shift in German military philosophy. By 1941, the German High Command realized that their Panzer III and IV tanks were meeting their match in the thick armor of the Soviet KV-1 and T-34. Hitler demanded a breakthrough tank, a machine so powerful that it could smash through any defensive line and shrug off any return fire. This led to a fierce competition between Henschel and Porsche, but it was Henschel's design that ultimately won. The result was the Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger, a 54-ton behemoth that looked like a terrifying, ironclad fortress. The defining feature of the Tiger was its legendary 88mm KWK-36 main gun. Originally a deadly anti-aircraft weapon, the 88 was modified for the Tiger, becoming the most feared cannon on any battlefield. It had such incredible muzzle velocity and ballistic accuracy that it could punch through 4 inches of steel from over 2,000 yards away. While Allied tanks had to get dangerously close to even hope for a kill, the Tiger could sit in a concealed position and pick off enemies with surgical precision before they even knew they were in a fight. It was a sniper's rifle mounted on a 50-ton chassis. To protect this massive weapon, the Tiger was wrapped in flat, thick plates of high-quality face-hardened steel. The front hull featured 100 mm of armor, making it practically invulnerable to almost every Allied anti-tank gun of 1942 and 1943. Unlike later tanks that used sloped armor, the Tiger relied on pure, brutal thickness. It was a massive, square-jawed brawler that dared the enemy to hit it. For a Sherman or AT-34 crew, seeing their shells spark and bounce harmlessly off the Tiger's vertical plates was a soul-crushing experience that led to the phenomenon known as Tiger Phobia. However, the Tiger was a masterpiece of over-engineering that pushed the limits of 1940s technology. Every component was precisely machined and incredibly complex. To distribute its 54 tons of weight, the Tiger used a sophisticated interleaved road wheel system. While this provided a stable firing platform and a surprisingly smooth ride for such a heavy machine, it was a maintenance nightmare. In the freezing winters of Russia, mud and snow would pack between the wheels and freeze solid overnight, completely locking the tank in place and forcing crews to build fires under the wheels just to move. Moving this iron giant required a massive amount of power. The Tiger was fitted with a 700 horsepower Maybach V12 engine, a masterpiece of German engineering that was constantly under immense strain. The Tiger wasn't slow, reaching speeds of nearly 24 miles per hour, but it was incredibly thirsty. It consumed fuel at an alarming rate, requiring a massive logistical tail to keep it moving. In a war of movement, the Tiger's hunger for petrol was its greatest strategic weakness, as the German army struggled to keep their elite heavy tank battalions fueled during the long, desperate retreats of the later war. Only 1,350 Tiger I tanks were ever built, a tiny fraction compared to the 50,000 Shermans or 80,000 T-34s produced by the Allies. The Tiger was never a mass-produced tank, it was a specialized, handcrafted weapon that required an immense amount of skilled labor and rare materials like chromium. Every Tiger lost was an irreplaceable blow to the German armored force. It was a weapon of quality in a war of quantity, a boutique predator that was designed to win battles but was ultimately crushed by the industrial arithmetic of a global conflict that Germany simply could not sustain. The Tiger's combat debut at Leningrad in late 1942 was a tactical disaster due to poor terrain, but it didn't take long for the tank to find its rhythm and start reaping a grim harvest. During the Battle of Kursk, the Tiger proved its worth as the ultimate breakthrough weapon. Entire companies of Tigers led the German spearheads, absorbing hundreds of hits while obliterating Soviet tank brigades from miles away. It was here that the Tiger's reputation as an unkillable monster was cemented, as Soviet tankers watched in horror as their standard 76mm shells failed to penetrate the Tiger even at point-blank range. On the Western Front, the Tiger became the stuff of nightmares after the invasion of Normandy. The most famous encounter occurred at Villers-Bocage, where a single Tiger commander, Michael Wittmann, ambushed a British armoured column. In less than 15 minutes, Wittmann destroyed nearly 14 tanks and 15 transport vehicles, practically halting an entire British advance by himself. This single engagement sent shockwaves through the Allied command. The message was clear: if a Tiger was in the area, no Allied tank was safe, and the only way to kill it was to swarm it with overwhelming numbers or call in a massive airstrike. The Tiger phobia was so intense that Allied generals had to issue official orders forbidding their men from reporting every German tank as a Tiger. Every Panzer IV or even a camouflaged anti-tank gun was reported as a Tiger by terrified crews. This psychological edge allowed German commanders to hold vast sectors of the front with only a handful of heavy tanks. The mere rumor that a Tiger battalion was in the area could cause an entire Allied offensive to slow down as commanders moved with extreme caution, fearing a sudden ambush from a predator they couldn't see. However, the Tiger's greatest enemy was often itself. The tank was so heavy that it couldn't use most European bridges, and it was too wide to be transported by rail without removing its outer road wheels and fitting specialized transport tracks. This logistical nightmare meant that Tiger units were often late to the battlefield or arrived exhausted from the effort of just getting there. If a Tiger broke down in the field, it took 2 or 3 other heavy tanks just to tow it to safety. The king of the battlefield was often a prisoner of its own weight and complexity. Life inside the Tiger was a cramped, noisy, and high-stakes environment. The 5-man crew lived in a world of high-octane fuel fumes, burnt cordite, and the deafening roar of the Maybach engine. Despite the terror it projected to the outside world, the inside of a Tiger was a place of extreme stress. The commander had to be a master of optics and distance estimation, while the driver had to handle the delicate transmission with surgeon-like precision. One wrong move, one forced gear shift in soft mud, and the 50-ton beast would become a stationary target, its legendary armor quickly turning into a steel coffin. By 1944, the Allies had finally begun to develop answers to the Tiger. The British Firefly with its 17-pounder gun and the Soviet IS-2 with its massive 122mm cannon could finally kill a Tiger from a distance. The era of invincibility was over. The Tiger was no longer a hunter that could ignore its prey, it was now a target that had to use its superior training and optics just to survive. Yet, even as the walls closed in on the Third Reich, the Tiger remained the most dangerous tank in the world, fighting desperate rearguard actions and holding the line with a level of ferocity that commanded respect from its enemies. The Tiger I was more than just a machine, it was a weapon that demanded elite operators to reach its full, terrifying potential. The German army created independent heavy panzer battalions, filling them with the most experienced tank crews available. This led to the rise of legendary tank aces like Michael Wittmann, Otto Carius, and Kurt Nispel. These men didn't just drive tanks, they mastered them like precision instruments. Otto Carius, in his famous memoir Tigers in the Mud, described how a well-coordinated Tiger crew could dominate an entire sector of the front, using their superior optics and long-range firepower to hold off dozens of Soviet tanks at a time, turning the Tiger into a scalpel that could dissect an enemy offensive. However, the brilliance of these aces was constantly overshadowed by the Tiger's extreme mechanical fragility. The tank was a masterpiece of over-engineering, but it was never truly fit for the brutal reality of a long war of attrition. The transmission and final drives were under constant, immense strain from the 54-ton mass of the hull. A single aggressive gear shift or a sudden turn in soft mud could snap a drive shaft, instantly turning the world's most powerful weapon into a stationary bunker. For every hour the Tiger spent in combat, it required dozens of hours of complex maintenance, leaving crews exhausted as they fought a constant battle against their own machinery just to stay mobile. The logistical nightmare of the Tiger reached its peak during the long retreats of 1944. Because the tank was so wide, it could not be transported by rail without removing its outer road wheels and fitting specialized transport tracks. This process took hours of grueling physical labor, and in the chaos of a retreat, there was often no time. If a Tiger broke down or ran out of fuel, it required 2 or 3 other heavy recovery vehicles to tow it. Consequently, hundreds of Tigers were abandoned or blown up by their own crews to prevent capture, meaning the German army destroyed more of its own legendary tanks than the Allies ever did in actual tank-on-tank combat. The interleaved roadwheel system, while providing a smooth ride, was a fatal design flaw in the freezing winters of the Eastern Front. Mud, slush, and snow would pack into the gaps between the overlapping wheels and freeze solid overnight. By morning, the Tiger would be literally frozen to the ground, its tracks unable to move. Soviet infantry soon learned to wait for the coldest nights to attack Tiger positions, knowing the German giants would be stationary targets. This was a classic example of German engineering perfection failing to account for the primitive and brutal reality of a Russian winter, where a simple crowbar was sometimes more useful than a high-tech engine. To keep the Tiger fighting, the Germans had to maintain a massive supply chain of specialized spare parts and high-quality lubricants that were increasingly rare as the war progressed. The Allied bombing of German industrial centers like Kassel, where the Tiger was built, decimated production and left frontline units without the parts they needed. Many Tigers went into battle with improvised repairs or missing equipment, further reducing their legendary reliability. It was a war of factories as much as a war of tanks, and the Tiger was a luxury that a crumbling empire could no longer afford to support in the field. Despite these problems, the Tiger remained the most respected tank on the battlefield until the very end. The Tiger phobia was so deep-seated that Allied commanders would often halt an entire offensive just because a single Tiger was reported in the area. This psychological edge allowed a handful of Tigers to hold off entire battalions, buying time for the retreating Wehrmacht. The tank had become a myth, a ghost that haunted the dreams of Allied tankers, proving that in war, the reputation of a weapon can sometimes be just as effective as its actual performance on the front lines. As the Allied and Soviet pincers closed on Germany in 1945, the surviving Tigers were used as mobile fire brigades, rushed from one collapsing front to another to plug gaps in the line. By this point, the Tiger was no longer a hunter, it was a desperate defender fighting for survival in the ruins of its own cities. In the final battles for Berlin, Tigers were dug into the rubble of street corners, serving as stationary pillboxes that exacted a bloody price from the advancing Soviet columns. It was a grim, claustrophobic end for a machine that had once dominated the wide-open steppes of Russia and the deserts of Tunisia. When the final surrender came, the era of the Tiger was over, but its influence on military history was only just beginning. Allied and Soviet engineers scrambled to capture intact Tigers, eager to study the secrets of their armor and the legendary 88mm gun. The Soviets, in particular, were impressed by the quality of the German optics and the precision of the manufacturing, though they remained critical of the tank's impractical weight. The Tiger had forced the world to realize that the era of light and medium tanks was ending, paving the way for the development of the main battle tank that would dominate the Cold War. Interestingly, the Tiger's design had very little influence on the future of tank silhouettes. Its flat, vertical armor was a dead end in an era that was quickly moving toward the sloped designs of the T-54 and the Centurion. The Tiger was the last and greatest of the old-school tanks, a machine that relied on pure, brutal thickness rather than clever angles. It was an evolutionary peak that could go no further, a dinosaur of the industrial age that was perfectly adapted for its time but unable to survive in a world where speed, mobility, and ease of production were becoming more important than raw armor. Today, only 6 Tiger I tanks survive in museums around the world, with the most famous being Tiger 131 at the Bovington Tank Museum in England. This is the only Tiger in the world still in running condition, and seeing it move today is a haunting experience. The distinctive, heavy thrum of its Maybach engine and the metallic clatter of its massive tracks still command a strange kind of respect. It serves as a physical reminder of a time when this 54-ton monster was the most feared object on Earth, a machine that changed the lives of millions and redefined the meaning of armored warfare forever. The Tiger remains a central figure in the culture of military history, appearing in countless movies, books, and video games. It has become the definitive boss of World War II, the ultimate challenge for any protagonist. This cultural legacy has often reinforced the myths of the Tiger's invincibility, sometimes overshadowing the reality of its mechanical failures and the immense suffering of the men who fought inside it. But whether you view it as a masterpiece of engineering or a logistical disaster, there is no denying that the Tiger I is the most iconic tank ever built, a machine that left a permanent scar on the history of the 20th century. In the final analysis, the Tiger I was a magnificent failure. It won almost every battle it entered, but it helped lose the war by draining Germany's limited resources and focus. It was a predator that was too expensive to feed and too complex to heal. It remains a testament to the brilliance and the madness of German engineering, a machine that reached for perfection but was ultimately crushed by the weight of its own ambition. The Tiger's roar has long been silent, but its shadow still looms large over every battlefield, reminding us of a time when the sky was dark and the earth trembled under the tracks of the Iron King.